and welcome to Murder with Friends, the show where friends get together and talk about the darker sides of history. I'm your host, Grace Baldridge, and you're joining us on a campfire episode. The way that these episodes work is I pick a general theme for 3 different cases that we're going to discuss as a panel. The theme for this week is the crimes of Lifetime. We're going to be discussing crimes that have been adapted into Lifetime movies, and I'm joined by some of my favorites. Amir, God damn it, why do you keep wandering into the studio? Christine Medrano and Jason Carter. This is y'all's first time doing a campfire episode, so welcome.
Grace, when you said campfire, I was like, are we going somewhere?
I remember when I asked Jason if you were available, you said, you're like, I'm gonna have to check my schedule. How long is the camping? And I'm like, it's not.
Oh my God, are you serious?
Yeah.
That's amazing.
And I was like, it's real short. It's just about an hour of your time.
I thought like, cause you're such a camping aficionado, so I thought, oh, Grace is taking us off the grid.
It gave me an idea for season 3. Maybe we just do these at an actual campfire.
Yeah, go buy a tent.
Yeah.
No, thank you.
So first of all, we're gonna be talking about the case of Amanda Knox today, which was adapted into a Lifetime movie in 2011. But before we can get into that, Amir, how would you describe what a Lifetime movie is to someone that isn't familiar with the genre?
Yeah, so Lifetime movies are kind of the quintessential bad TV movies. And to people maybe like not in America who really don't get that, they're based on real stories and they end up being a projection of society's most emotional and worst perceptions of these certain sensational cases.
Yeah, so let's just jump right into it then. In 2007, there was the murder of Meredith Kercher. It was a really brutal scene. This took place in Perugia, Italy on November 1st. She had been stabbed, she had been beaten. It indicated that there was some sort of a break-in that happened. Let's talk about this case. What do you guys know? Let's just set the scene.
So Meredith Kercher was studying abroad in Italy along with a few other people, including Amanda Knox. And they lived in this house with a couple other Italian students, I think, that were older. But Meredith and Amanda ended up kind of like hitting it off a little bit in the beginning. And over time, they stopped hanging out as much. But what happened was Meredith was found murdered in this house.
Yeah.
And that's when things just really went crazy.
And let's talk about the discovery of the scene, because that would really play into how Amanda was implicated as perhaps a guilty party in this crime. So Amanda comes home after spending the night with her boyfriend, Gabriele Sollecito. Raphael.
Gabriele,
all the Ninja Turtles right now. Michelangelo, Donatello,
Raffaelli.
So Amanda comes home from spending the night with her boyfriend, and what does she find? What's the scene here?
The door is unlocked. She actually doesn't even notice in the beginning because she goes and she showers. She says that she sees a few specks of blood on where the sink is, but she doesn't know that there's like a bloody footprint on the bath mat, so she goes and she showers. And so then it's only like later on that she kind of realizes that there's something awry, that her roommate's door is locked.
Yeah.
And then her boyfriend comes and joins her.
Well, she leaves. She leaves to go get him and then comes back. And something will be made of the fact that she's at the scene and spends time there without really noticing that something foul has gone wrong. And then when she realizes that something's wrong, instead of calling the police, she goes and gets her boyfriend. To me, that isn't particularly suspicious, because since the door was locked, she really didn't know what was happening.
Right, and the blood on the floor, she thought, because she lived with other women, she had thought maybe one of the girls was having their menstrual cycle, which I was like, okay. But so, I mean, back to what you're saying, it didn't really register that someone could be possibly bludgeoned and decapitated almost in the room behind the locked door.
The way she reacted initially just seems like that's how something like this would go down. Like, you're not going into your home like looking for a crime scene.
Yeah, I mean, I hear you on that, and perhaps it's just because I am just a suspicious Susan, but a lot of what the scene looked like, I would have been it's very eerie, and I would have been a little concerned that, Meredith's door was locked, like,
and there's blood on the floor.
There's blood on the floor. That, to me, I wouldn't write that off. As someone who experiences a period, I don't let that shit just like be on the bathroom floor.
Okay, you're right.
I guess my takeaway from that would be, I would just be like, oh my God, I hate my roommate.
Right.
They're
okay,
so
fair.
annoying.
Someone also didn't flush the toilet, so
like, you left the door unlocked and then you rush into the bathroom and then you're like dripping everywhere. I'm like, oh God.
Figure it out.
Yeah.
Right, okay, so that's a huge mess. But what really comes into play here is that it seems like investigators from the jump are interested in Amanda Knox and Raffaele. And I'm trying to think of why. I think a lot of it has to do with Amanda's behavior, because forensically, as we will find and has been very well documented, there's not much that ties Amanda to this murder. And in fact, there is so much forensic evidence that ties another party to this murder that Amanda had really no relationship with. So what was some of her behavior that people were saying was strange and perhaps pointed to her guilt?
She starts, like, when she finds out that her roommate is murdered, she's kind of very, like, there's the infamous kiss of, like, a footage of her kissing her boyfriend and kind of like not really interested in grieving.
Right, and also,
Aloof.
very aloof, great word, Amir. Also, the conversation she had with other people hours afterwards where, you know, she's with Raffaele, I love saying his name, Raffaele. And in the movie, one of the roommates says, oh my gosh, you know, Meredith is dead and you're over here being overtly sexual. And her response was, she suffered. She died. Along those lines, no kind of remorse, just complete disdain for the girl, checking her for not being remorseful, I guess. And anyone, if I had died, Grace, and you had been witness to that, I would hope that you wouldn't be like, oh my gosh, Jason's dead. Hey, let's go have a burger.
But
you know what I mean?
A little different, but yeah.
Right. But I think that witness testimony is so interesting in this case, and in many cases as well, because it is colored by that witness's experience with that person. And I think that you can't throw out, like, some witness testimony is awesome and it's great, but when it is absolutely shaped by your human lived emotional experience, since we are emotional beings, and how you interpreted someone's words, how they to mean, which is why there's such an issue with hearsay in court. You know, you can't really just say, well, I think they did this because of this thing that they said. Like, that's all speculative. But then what would come to play and really be very damning against Amanda Knox in the media was her actions. So for example, she goes and buys underwear following the murder, and it actually takes place on the day that there's a vigil for Meredith. So this looks really bad, and of course it was all picked up by the newspapers of, like, this callous, cold woman doesn't care. But the fact is that her house was partitioned off for investigators, so she didn't have access to underwear. Now, could she have probably picked a better time? Should she have gone to the vigil? That's a separate conversation. But the fact of the matter is, she wasn't buying underwear because she was so aroused by this murder. She was buying underwear for a utilitarian purpose, and it got totally spun in the media, which is, I think, that part of why we had this Lifetime movie, because we all followed whatever we were seeing in the media, like Foxy Knoxy, which was a nickname she got from playing soccer as like a 7-year-old or something like that.
The optics were bad from the start, and the tabloid media picked up on it really quick. Not only them, but the authorities did too, that this person was not behaving in the way that society expects you to behave when something like this happens, and they jumped on that.
So she's actually arrested and convicted, her and Solecito, but they would be released after 4 years following an acquittal at a second-level trial. And I don't understand how the Italian court system works, so I'm just gonna fly through this and hope that this makes sense. But basically, there was a lot of back and forth, whether she was found guilty and then acquitted, and then there was a point of appeal. Then there was the conviction of Knox and Solecito was eventually annulled by the Supreme Court in 2015, even though she'd already been freed and she went to the US, and technically she was allowed to travel back, but then she was also still wanted because she implicated her boss, Patrick Lumumba, when she was questioned under duress, as Amir, we talked about beforehand. I think it's really bad that she implicated an absolutely innocent man who did have to serve time behind bars. I think that's awful, and I don't think that we should diminish that, and I think it has kind of been diminished in time. Amir
it is, but
differs.
Keyword is duress. She was, what, 19 years old?
Right.
She hadn't slept for a long time. She was being questioned very aggressively. That's how duress happens. Like, you get people to say things that are completely false, but they say it because they're so exhausted. It's like
they just want an excuse.
It's
to get
psychological,
out of it.
And the people who prosecute or who interrogate these would be criminals know that. That's part of their MO. That's part of their tactic too. Because go ahead.
I don't want to diminish how messed up it is that they did this to this innocent guy, but yeah, I mean, you got to consider, like, the position that she was in. She was not in the right state of mind.
I hear you. I just think that she was supposed to pay him to compensate him for the time that he spent behind prison, and she hasn't done that. And that is like, that's the I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
I hear you. I just feel like that's something that we should be talking about. There was a totally innocent guy that was just thrown into this shitstorm.
And we should question.
Obviously, she was as well. Though,
Right, and she was too.
And we
You're
should
right.
question police tactics that go into getting like any kind of.
We absolutely should question how the police worked in this. It was really awful. I mean, the fact of the matter is that there was no ounce of Amanda Knox's DNA found in the room where Meredith Kercher was killed. However, that didn't stop them from putting her totally on trial. Now, what they did find was an exorbitant amount of DNA evidence, footprints, all this stuff, blood DNA, blood evidence found for Rudy Gaudet, who was a friend of Meredith Kercher's neighbors, or she had some sort of connection. And he also had a history of breaking in using the same MO of breaking a window with a rock. And they somehow tried to tie Amanda Knox and Raffaele to Rudy Gaudet, even though there's no connection there. And it seems as though, to me, that Rudy acted alone. Although Rudy asserts to this day, even though he's serving time behind bars, that he and Meredith had been fooling around. He excused himself to the bathroom, and then someone else broke in and
he heard her screaming. And that's when he tried to break up the situation.
Yeah, that's a total lie.
Yeah.
That's clearly.
Because I mean, when the details of the actual murder come out, you see that like whoever killed her ended up feeling some remorse about it because he tried to cover it up and tried to get towels to like staunch the bleeding.
Yeah.
So based on that, it seems like they did know each other to some extent.
There was a level of emotional attachment there.
Yeah. So that's sort of a condensed version of the case, and it was covered by Lifetime in 2011, Hayden Panettiere playing Amanda Knox. Let's take a look at this trailer.
Amanda, I hope this trip is everything you dreamed of. In Italy, they say everything's illegal and nothing's forbidden.
Amanda Marie Knox.
A good person, a good student, and a good friend.
Amanda Knox will be tried for murder. We suspect that it started as some sort of sex game.
That's not true.
Who are you trying to protect? I believe Amanda orchestrated the attack.
Foxy Knoxy swept into court like an invitee to a gala event.
They have no evidence.
Under the angel face, she's capable of anything.
She is kind and she's gentle.
She's evil.
The police threatened me.
She thinks we're in it, fools.
They say I'm calm. I'm not calm. I've been absolutely insane. Why are they doing this to me? My conscience is clean.
All right, so what did they get right? What did they get wrong? What did you think about this Lifetime treatment?
They got the casting right. I thought Hayden Panettiere did a pretty good job of playing Amanda Knox. The thing about Lifetime movies that always kind of makes me giggle a little is how fast they move through things, and then the lens and the myopic view they want you to view and have an opinion on the story with. If you look at the movie, you first feel that Amanda's innocent. She's from Seattle. And if you read it, where they have Grey's Anatomy.
And they can't kill people in Seattle. That's true.
No, but
it's against the law.
But Amanda allegedly, because I don't know the girl, but she was quirky. She had acne. She was, she wasn't an overtly sexual person as they made her out to be later on down the line. And in the movie, they have scenes where they show her being somewhat jealous of Meredith. Like when Meredith goes to the bar where Amanda's trying to get a job, and Meredith shows up and says, "Hey, I make the best mojitos." Patrick, who was the bar owner, is like, "Hey, you'll have Mojito Tuesdays with Meredith," and Amanda kind of looks at her like, "Oh, okay, you're kind of stepping on my toes now." So they played on this somewhat, I guess, jealousy between the two. Did you get that from that scene?
Yeah, I definitely did. And I think one of the things that really captured well in this is that you can control if you murder someone, but you can't control if you're convicted of a murder and how it's handled.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I think they really captured that, and it kind of made me so anxious because I was like, I don't know what I would do when they're doing that questioning scene, and they have the you see how long she's in there and how she's just like, I don't know, maybe yeah, I was with him, whatever. It was just like, I think they really captured the anxiety and how intense that situation would have been in Italy when she was being questioned.
Yeah. Also, if you read articles on it, especially domestic publications, they talk about how Italy and the Italians would kind of have a bias against Americans. How they made a field day of saying Foxy Noxy.
Right.
She's this predator, this man eater. They spun all these pictures that were me at a party with a telescope, making it seem like I'm this sex monster. That I'm this bad
There was
person.
definitely an accusation of anti-Americanism
For
throughout
sure.
the whole trial.
Yeah.
So
Slut shaming.
Yeah, and I think the slut shaming was so sort of bizarre because it seemed like, from what we know, this was Amanda's first sort of foray into experimenting, or like this wasn't really a character trait of hers that. You know what I mean?
They highlight so much that she had smoked weed and like had sex with a guy, and it's like, oh my
Okay,
god,
she's
we're all screwed.
Yeah.
Like, no.
Yeah, like that would
We're all
really, if I
there.
killed someone or if I was like around this, that would totally come up where it'd be like, well, she smoked weed, so
It's
you
like,
know what she's
whoa.
capable of. Something that the decision that they had to make in Lifetime was basically to paint Amanda Knox as either naive or as sort of callous. I don't think that they painted her necessarily with any great deal of guilt, but I think that they did show her to be this mixture of being cold and also naive, her first time abroad. And I think that does sort of veer on the truth of what went down. And I think that what they did really well with the movie was capturing the media sensationalism and the scandal surrounding the case. So that's what I think they did well. I didn't love the casting of Hayden Panettiere, but that's probably just because I only see her as Juliette Barnes from Nashville. So that's me. But this was the case of Amanda Knox as covered by, I was about to say Nashville, as covered by Lifetime. It has never been covered by the TV show Nashville, nor should it. We'd like to hear from you in the comments section below. Had you heard of this case before? I'm sure you had. And what are your thoughts, questions, comments, and concerns on it? We'll see you next time on Murder with Friends.